Good morning. How are you all today? Thank you for viewing with us. And thank you for supporting us and also encouraging us through your comments and questions on YouTube and Facebook. We're continuing our studies in 1 Samuel. And we're going to be in chapter 18 today. And from this chapter throughout the rest of this book, we'll be learning and seeing how King Saul's pride is being exposed. And so we'll be looking at the regression of King Saul's behavior and how jealousy is a result of pride. And so Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty or stubborn or arrogant spirit before fall. And we're going to see how this works from this chapter and throughout the rest of the book. And so chapter 18 of 1 Samuel, it begins with a love covenant between Jonathan and David. Jonathan is King Saul's son. And it continues, this chapter 18 continues from chapter 17, where David killed Goliath and Saul's reaction to that. So verse 1, and it came to pass when he, that is David, had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit or united with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. This is brotherly love. They loved each other as they loved themselves. And so when it says, when he had made an end of speaking to Saul, that continues when Saul was asking, whose son is this? And David responded, I am the son of my father Jesse. And Jonathan is there listening. Verse 2. And Saul took David that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house. Verse 3. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. So Jonathan loved David, and David is going to respond in kind through the events that take place in the rest of the book. So Jonathan showed his love in verse 4. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, showing him, Jonathan, this is the time of the kings, and the next king would operate only after his father had died. And so Saul was looking at leaving the throne to Jonathan, who was his oldest son. And so Jonathan, showing humility, stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and his girdle or belt. And David went out, verse 5, whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. So David could have felt exalted, but he was humble in that he did what King Saul said do, and he behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people. David was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Verse 6. And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. Verse 7, and the women answered one another or sang in courses as they played and said, Saul had slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. That's when Saul got jealous, as the next verse will show, that he becomes very angry. And anger exists out of pride. And Saul was very wroth in verse 8. And the saying displeased him. He did not like the women giving more credit to David than to him. And Saul said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more than the kingdom? He feels threatened, just as the religious leaders felt threatened when Jesus came into his earthly ministry. And so verse 9 says, and Saul eyed or watched David from that day and forward. Verse 10, and it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. So he's so angry that he's going to try to kill David. Verse 11, and Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it, with the sword, the javelin. And David avoided out of his presence twice. So David recognized that Saul's heart has changed toward him. But look at Saul's feelings, verse 12. And Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. The Lord had departed from Saul. Verse 13, therefore Saul removed him from him. He demoted David and made him his captain over 1,000, showing that David deserved for the women to say he had killed 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. So David is behaving himself wisely still. He's not going to retaliate. He just slipped out of the presence of Saul. And David, verse 14, behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. The Lord was with David. Verse 15, wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. He became more afraid of him. Verse 16, but all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. He was a great leader. Verse 17, and Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me and fight for the Lord's battle. Fight the Lord's battles. So Saul should have given his daughter, as he said in verse 17, after David slew Goliath. But now he's saying he wants David to marry his daughter and her to become his wife. And he says he's setting David up. Only be thou valiant for me, not for the people, and fight the Lord's battles. For he said, for Saul said, let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. So he's being treacherous. Verse 18, and David said unto Saul, who am I, and what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? Verse 19, but it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel the Maholathite to wife. So he didn't keep his word. He's trying to set David up to kill him. So this second daughter, Michelle or Michael, or however you pronounce her name, Saul's daughter, and Michael, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Verse 21, and Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the two or the twain. You'll get Michael to be your wife. And Saul commanded his servants, saying, verse 22, commune with David secretly, and say, behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. Verse 23, and Saul's servants spake these words in the ears of David. And David said, seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, or an insignificant thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and lightly esteemed? Saul hates me. He's trying to kill me, and he doesn't see me as a value to him. Verse 24, and the servants of Saul told him, saying, on this manner spake David. Verse 25, and Saul said, thus shall ye say to David, the king desireth not a dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemy. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when he talks about a king that he didn't desire any dowry, the dowry was given to the husband of the bride. And Saul said, you don't have to give me any gifts, but bring me these foreskins of the Philistines. Verse 26, and when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. In other words, Saul set a particular amount of time for David to respond. Verse 27. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men. And David brought the foreskins, and they gave them in full count a tally to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal or Michal, his daughter, to wife. Now, David doubled the amount to bring to King Saul to show that he was responding to taking Michal to be his wife. Verse 28, and Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. So our conduct and the way we behave in the presence of others will display whether we're God's following the Lord or following our pride. Verse 29, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David. So fear, we know God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. And Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Verse 30, then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. He became very popular and the people loved him. But when it talks about David behaving or conducting himself wisely, it asserts that David, the fear of the Lord, is the beginning of wisdom. And so you can't be wise without God leading and guiding you. And so David's character is being on display. So this is the beginning of showing or exposing King Saul's pride. And again, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So we can look at the life of David contrasted with King Saul and examine our own hearts. So you all be good, be thankful, pray for us, and we're praying for you. You all have a great day and a great week. Bye.